Welcome to Sports Spectrum, the sports and faith podcast that brings Jesus back into the conversation. Here's your host, Jason Romano.
Hey everyone, welcome to Sports Spectrum. I am Jason Romano. We are presented by IJM, helping to protect more than 150 million people worldwide from violence and oppression. Check out their website, ijm.org/TF, ijm.org/TF, to learn how you can become a Freedom Partner today. And we are excited to be joined on the show, Sports Spectrum, by Souza. He is an outfielder, a baseball player with the Chicago Cubs. In his first year with the Cubs, he just signed a one-year deal here in 2020. Prior to that, he was with the Diamondbacks in 2018 and 2019. Before that, with Tampa in 2015 through 2017. Originally selected in the third round of the 2007 MLB draft by the Washington Nationals. Souza. He's got a great story of faith, of coming back to Christ, of understanding who Jesus is, and really overcoming devastating injuries and some really big turmoil and trials and certainly valleys in his life that have forced him to really push in and lean in to his faith. This is a really good interview. Souza, Chicago Cubs outfielder. He joins us here today on Sports Spectrum. Take a listen. Stephen, welcome to Sports Spectrum.
Hey, thanks for having me on. Pleasure to be here.
It's good to talk to you, Stephen. We're glad to have you on, albeit in the circumstances that we're in right now with the quarantine life that we're all living. I know you're back in Seattle, the hometown out there in the state of Washington. So what does now look like for you as we're all sort of forced into this waiting mode with yours and everyone else's MLB journey placed on hold?
Yeah, right now it's just a lot of time with my son and my daughter and my wife, hanging out. You know, we live kind of not way out in the middle of the country, but we live away from the city, so it's very quiet and peaceful out here. And we're just hanging out. We got a gym at my house that my wife and I are lifting every day, and I've got a cage that I'm able to hit, and you know, we're just doing all those things, finding a new routine amidst the chaos, and
Nice.
We're doing all right.
Wife and I both lifting, so your wife's in there with you, huh? Getting it done.
My wife is getting after it. She gets after it 5 days a week with me. She's impressive.
That's awesome. It's good to have a partner because we all got to social distance. It sounds like you can social distance without it even having to be a mandatory thing because of where you're staying.
Exactly. Yeah, I've got all the essentials I need here. I've got a Traeger, a cage, and a gym, and that's all I need.
Nice. Take us back a little bit, if you would, to your last day playing. It was Wednesday, March 11th. It was a spring training game against San Diego. The night the sports world stopped, as I like to tell people after the NBA's announcement and MLB soon following right behind. Did you realize when you were playing that game that this would be the last time you'd play for a very long time?
You know, I just told somebody the story yesterday. I was in right field, and this kid is yelling my name. And, you know, kids yell my name all the time, asking for a ball or something,
Yeah.
But it was different. It was like he was like urgently trying to get my attention. And so I turned around and I said, "What's up, buddy?" And he said, "The NBA has been canceled. They canceled their season. Rudy Gobert got coronavirus."
Yeah.
And at that moment, I started to really think like we're probably going to be done for a while. Now at the limit or at the length, I had no idea. I really didn't. I knew we were going to be done for quite a while until they could figure something out. But, yeah, to where it's gone to the point of trying to figure out all this season stuff, no, I didn't see this all coming.
So explain to the fan that's listening, or just the listener that may not even be a big, huge fan, but to understand going from off season to spring training to back to sort of off season, that's a lot, right? I mean, you have to you're setting up shop and getting ready for another season to go to Arizona for spring training and then eventually to Chicago to start your first year with the Cubs. And all of a sudden you're back uprooted to the house.
Yeah, I think, no sympathy needed, but like our lives are flow in this rhythm, right, of starting spring training, then getting your mind ready to go into the year, then cooling down towards the end, whether you make playoffs or not, and then taking a break, and then slowly ramping it back up only to hit the peak right at a certain time, right as you're about to go, and just continuously do that as long as you're allowed to have this uniform on. And so this is a huge wrench, and as baseball players, we're creatures of routine, and we're used to that. And so it's really difficult. I don't think guys, we talked about it right out of the gate, is like your motivation is always at the end of the year, depending on what happened the year before. You're trying to, build off of it and work and make adjustments and change and then take that into the next year. Well, there's not really a motivation right now. Like, we're just kind of sitting and waiting, and we've already prepared our bodies for the season, and now we're just told, oh, wait, hold on. And so that's a little difficult to wrap your mind around about how to get in the gym and, and how to get in the cage and stay ready when you don't even know if we're going to play this year,
Yeah. So what is that like for you? Are you kind of putting yourself back into the mode of maybe where you were in November, December, or are you just kind of getting at it every day with sort of this new routine and then maybe wait for the call to have them tell you, hey, we're going to be starting up in a month or whatever? Where are you kind of in that mode?
Yeah, so I feel like I'm an anomaly out of the group of our players because, with the injury that happened to me last year, I have been in this place for a long time.
Yeah.
In the sense of, like, I didn't know when I was going to be ready to play. There wasn't there was a target date, but it was just more a focus on the day-to-day and rehab my knee and my quads and all the muscles around my knee, and just get ready to keep building it up until it's as strong as it could possibly be. So once I got home and after the first week, I kind of fell back into that. It was almost like I got to spring and I kind of checked it off, like, okay, I'm done with my rehab. Mm-hmm. But when I came back home, it was like, okay, just keep going on your rehab, because there's not too much rehab I can do on this knee. I can keep going and staying ready and sharpening my skills and all the little things around. And so my wife and I kind of fell back into that as far as like getting ready for the season, and it's been a blessing.
The last two springs obviously being memorable with a pandemic this year, and you talked about the injury last year. You were on track with Arizona getting ready for the season, and then all of a sudden what I think is an unusual injury for a baseball player, although it's an injury that we've seen, but it's a very unusual but very devastating, I guess, injury in the sense that it knocked you out for 2019. Can you take us back and kind of walk us through what happened?
Well, Jason, my last three springs, they have not gone according to plan. So this is nothing normal. Yeah, I tore my pec in 18, and then I tore almost all the ligaments in my knee. And then obviously with the pandemic this year, it just has not gone the way I want. So, right. But yeah, I was coming off the injury. It was a tough year for me in 2018. Not a lot of people knew I was fighting through a pec all year. I mean, they knew I was hurt, but they didn't know at the back end. So coming in, I was like fresh start, ready to go, and had a great spring, and got to the end of spring, second to last game, exhibition game at the stadium, and my world was just turned upside down in a matter of seconds, milliseconds. What felt like an eternity sliding across home plate with my leg happened in just seconds, and it changed the trajectory of my career. And it was hard. It was really hard. That first, I think, probably 2 weeks after was pretty difficult for me.
When you say difficult, I'm assuming you mean just emotionally and mentally trying to deal with all that. Yeah,
I think because if it was an isolated and I didn't get hurt the year before, maybe it's a little bit different, Yeah. But coming off of back-to-back seasons where it was two very uncontrollable injuries. One was I dove, which I've done thousands of times, and in spring training I've done multiple times. I just had dove like 2 days before and caught a ball and doubled someone off against the Brewers. And then I dove and tore my pec. And then that one, just so much out of my control that you're just sitting there, just walking back, like, what could I have done differently? And of course you go and say, oh, I could have done this and this and this. But it was just hard. It was hard to think that I wasn't going to play baseball for a year. It was hard to think that I wasn't be able to run. I love running. to move around? Was I ever going to be athletic? There was just so many question marks because of the seriousness and, all the ligaments I tore. It was just, nobody knew if I was going to ever play again. Nobody knew if I was going to be able to run the same. A doctor even told me, I don't even know if you're going to be able to straighten your leg again. Mm-hmm. So there was just a bunch of doubts and, a lot of emotion that really hit me hard in those first 2 weeks.
We're going to take a quick break and tell you a little bit more about IJM, International Justice Mission. We love those guys. We love having them as partners. We love what they stand for. And what they stand for is bringing criminals to justice, rescuing victims of violence, restoring survivors, and strengthening justice systems, believing that every person deserves to be safe and free from violence. And they are helping, as we say, to protect more than 150 million people from violence worldwide. Go to ijm.org/TF and learn how you can join the fight and become a freedom partner for just $24 or more each month. These partners are the most loyal partners of IJM's in the work of justice. Check it out, ijm.org/TF, and join the fight against violence and oppression today. Let's get back to our conversation with Steven Souza from the Chicago Cubs, joining us here on Sports Spectrum. So your story of faith, which I really want to dive into, is a great one too. And I know that kind of happened more recently than it did when you were younger in terms of rededicating or dedicating yourself to Christ. But walk us through how your faith helped you that last year, and even maybe really right now in terms of what you're going through, again, what everybody's going through with the pandemic, but how the Lord's, working on you and has worked on you to help you kind of deal with setbacks, maybe that you would have dealt with differently without him.
Yeah, I can't even begin to think where I'd be at. Like I don't know where my motivation would have been after such a tough couple of years, to do everything I could. But it's everything, it's easy for me to ask for sympathy in my situation with my knee. But then I look at guys in the Bible that walk through tougher things, like what Daniel went through in the civilization of Babylon, and being 7 years old and walking thousands of miles and being thrown in a lion's den and in a jail and persecuted, and Joseph and all these people, and Paul being thrown in prison. Just all these people have been through so many things. Jesus, and it's easy to gain perspective really quick and say, well, just because I'm a Christian, it doesn't mean that I'm going to be rich, powerful, and everything's going to be okay the rest of my life. That's not why you commit your life to Christ. You commit your life to Christ because he's the forgiving grace that he has for you, and the perfect path he has for you is unlike and unmatched by anything out there. And the hope that you can have through him, that it's not in this life, it's the one to come, is irreplaceable. And so when I'm hurt like I was last year, I look at it not in the sense of like, why me, which I can't say that I didn't think about that in the first week or 2 weeks. Yeah. But, when it all settles down, you get to the point of seeing what is God trying to teach me through this? What do I need to learn through this? And how do I come out of this and say that I thrived in this scenario? Because God uses suffering and struggles to help mold us and shape us into the image of Jesus. And when I can concentrate on that through this rehab, it was easy.
Steven Souza is our guest here on Sports Spectrum, Chicago Cubs outfielder. All right, so share your testimony a little bit. I've read about it. You've written for us on The Increase, theincrease.com, and shared it in a few other places that I've seen. But I would love for you to share it one more time with our audience and have them hear how the Lord kind of wrecked you and got a hold of you.
Yeah. I'll give you a condensed version, but the condensed, because I could talk about it for an hour. I've talked about it sometimes for 2 hours because it's just amazing to watch the Lord like put these pieces together, and sure, to bring them all, to like leave some of those out is hard for me because I love talking about the things that the Lord did there. So, but I'll give you the condensed version. The short version is that I grew up in the church. My parents took me to church. I listened to DC Talk, worship songs in the car. Yeah. We didn't really dive into the Bible when I was a kid at home. And kind of once I hit sports, it stopped for me. We were playing on Sundays, and I became a pretty good player. And so we were playing on travel balls all over the team, and sports just took precedent over Jesus really fast like that. And it was when I got into high school. And so then once I got drafted, I kind of continued on that same trajectory. But I tried to have money and fame be my God really, really quickly. Because everybody knew I was drafted really high. I had a lot of money as an 18-year-old, and that can be really dangerous. So then I stunk really bad my first 4 years of pro baseball. And not only did I stink, I just didn't have a whole lot of like genuine relationships that were more than just surface level, you know. And so in 2011, I had my worst year as a pro, and I said something happened where I violated team rules, and the manager told me I wasn't going to be starting that game, and I pouted, and I was throwing an adult fit, you know, because we adults think that we don't throw fits when we get older like kids, but we just do it in a different way. And so I did that, and I was in the cage, and I was being lackadaisical, and he told me, get out of the cage and go sit in the stands. And I said, I'll do you one better. I'll go home. I'm quitting. So I called the GM, and I said, I quit. I'm done. And I really did think I was done there. And so I went home, and baseball was my God. That was my identity. That was everything that was wrapped into me. And so when that was torn from me, I didn't know who I was anymore. And, you know, I think sometimes it's easy for us to see what is our identity, and then other times it's really not, because sometimes our identity can be a good thing, but we just make it a God. And in this one, it was easy for me to get taken and understand that baseball was not life, family was not life. But I needed to figure out that what was life about, and so kind of went on this journey, and I ended up going to this wedding, and I meet this girl, and she is my buddy who's getting married sister, and she loves Jesus. And so I'm talking to her, and she's a beautiful girl, and I'm like, man, I really like this girl. I think I need to step up my Jesus game in order to talk to her. So I go home, and I read some scripture, and I'm like trying to get some stuff about Jesus so I can talk to her, and like, oh yeah, this. And then it becomes way more than that. It becomes like, whoa, this stuff is actually making sense. And then I'm taking this stuff and I'm asking somebody about it, like, hey, have you heard about this? And then I'm just diving deeper and deeper into scripture. And before I know it, I'm not even talking to the girl anymore. And I'm just falling in love with Jesus at this moment. And I remember this when I was a kid. I watched people get baptized. And I knew that this is something that I could proclaim, that I'm headed in a different direction. Like I'm moving away from the world, and I'm moving towards Jesus, and I want everybody to know so they can hold me accountable. And I did that, and my life was just radically changed. A lot of the things that I did before, they just stopped. You know, I had a filthy mouth before, and like when I came out of the water, it was done. And then there was a lot of things where it's been a process, and still to this day, I'm being sanctified. And so it was cool to see both of them, because I didn't know anything about the other side of, you know, putting your faith in Christ. So, you know, stuff I've heard is like, oh, you're just changed right away, everything in you. And then you learn quickly that it's like, no, it's sanctification process is a slow process that the Lord uses you to shape you. And so it's been a cool process ever since.
That's exactly what it is. It's a process, and that's a great story. Thank you for sharing it. So let me put you in the mode of being in the clubhouse, right? And let's say you're having a conversation with someone. It might be a teammate, or it just might be a fan of yours. It's like, why do you sign your autograph this way? Or why do you have that cross on your shirt? Or why do you sing worship songs, or whatever it is that you're doing that they might catch and see is different. And you're having a conversation. And they have never heard about God. Maybe they grew up in church like you, but don't really know what relationship means, or what that's very foreign to them, right? So talk to that person. Maybe it's even a listener to this interview right now, and share with them what you would probably, or how you would go about sharing with them the hope that you found inside.
Yeah. It's funny, this question was just asked to me the other day. Someone just asked me, how do you have so much peace during this time of craziness where everybody around the world is like anxious and fearful, and people are going crazy in their houses. And so I was like, well, thank you for that layup, Jesus. Let me tell you, sir, why I have this peace that surpasses all understanding.
That's awesome.
So that was really cool. But, I think early on in my journey, I tried to, I was on fire for Lord, and I still am to an extent. But when you first come to Jesus, you're like, I need to tell every person that I come in contact with, and they need to be saved right now. And so now as a guy in the big leagues, because I'm with people for so long, it's a process. So it's more of now I try and get to know them so they can trust my words, because trust is huge in this idea of sharing the gospel. Is if you're not living up to what you're saying, people are just going to write you off. They don't care. And in my specific scenario, I have 25 to 40 people that get to see if I'm living up to what I'm saying or not. And so when I kind of have gained that kind of trust, I basically just, ask, simple questions like, what do you think happens to us when we die? Or just simply like, hey, what do you think about Jesus? Did you go to church as a kid? Where you just kind of prod them and ask questions, and then just share my story. I think the biggest thing that I love to do is I don't want to force what I believe onto people, but there's nothing wrong with sharing the good news and sharing what Jesus has done with me. That's what's true. That's what's happened to me. And the thing in my journey that's really changed me is I don't get to save the souls. Matthew says some water, some plant, but only God can grow. And when that verse really took home in my heart, I realized it's just my job to share what Jesus has done in me. And it's not that I look for specific moments like, okay, I'm doing it right now. It's that I'm living every single day like Jesus and hoping and loving people unconditionally and sharing the truth. And sometimes when it's hard, you still have to do that. And directing them back to the Bible. I think those are kind of the keys that I use to share the gospel with people.
I love it. I think it's great, and it's awesome, an encouragement not only to me, having walked with the Lord for about almost 20 years now, but having those listening know that there is a way and a hope. We need to be prepared to share that, but not throw it in people's faces and be forceful on them ever, but be open to when somebody asks you about peace or hope. Be willing to share that. Let me ask you about hope regarding baseball. So as we wind down here, we're still in this waiting mode on when baseball might be played again. I read a few days ago about some different scenarios that some of the leaders behind closed doors are pondering, helping bring back baseball, including one that had everyone playing in Arizona, I think I read, or Arizona and Florida in the spring training sites. What are your thoughts on either that scenario like that or just some alternate scenarios that can help you get back into playing baseball this year?
Yeah. Before I talk about that, I was just thinking about something as you were saying that, and I just wanted to hammer the point.
Please.
Because, when your daughter has a birthday, or your son or your wife or your birthday, people, what do? They go and they share it on Instagram, and they share it with on Twitter and wherever. They're sharing that good news about what's happened to them if they get a promotion. And that's what we got to do with Jesus, is we share that good news. When something that has changed our lives has happened to us, we share it. That's not being overly aggressive. And you don't shy away from the truth when it's asked to you. That's not being offensive either. You're just sharing the good news. So sorry, I had that in my head, and I wanted to share that.
Great. No, that's good encouragement, Steve. I appreciate that.
Yeah. But no, as far as all these scenarios, there's 800 scenarios out there, I think. And I don't think there's one that's hit. I think we'll know better in like a month where this kind of virus is turning. Because I just don't think we know. It could flatline and we could be okay here, and the summer could take it away. Or it could get really worse, and then we may not be playing. So I think I don't think anybody really knows. I think MLB and the union are doing a really good job painting out all these scenarios in case something happens, because it's pretty obvious that the owners, the players, the GMs. I think the country wants sports back, and I think everybody's doing their best to make sure that the American population still has, they're the first priority to get tests and stuff, but allow us to be tested too, so we can give the American people healing. And I think that's the cool thing about sports is everybody wants to come back, and I think players want to, because it provides an outlet of healing, and it's a microcosm of life of baseball is the struggle and the get back up and the underdog, and people can gravitate to these players and really personalities that they relate to and root for them and get behind. And that's the part we're missing right now in America.
This has been great. Steven Souza, thanks so much for being here, man. Last question. You kind of mentioned it, and it might be a long answer, might be a short answer, might even be just one word, but you mentioned about God teaching us something every day. This is a question we ask all of our guests on Sports Spectrum. What's he teaching you right now? What's the Lord showing you as he's sanctifying you, as he's in this process of becoming more real to you every day? What's he teaching you?
Yeah. I think the biggest thing he's teaching me right now is seeking shalom and seeking that peace, regardless of my circumstances. Being able to put down my phone and not sink my head into social media, or just check out and just be able to slow down and sit in silence. We have I know for me, my life is so fast and so loud and busy, and I can come up with a million excuses of why I got to go do something instead of just sitting and resting. And we as a culture have a hard time just resting. And so for me, I'm just being really challenged by God to pour into my family and just use this time to just slow down, rest, and just listen to him and just be with him. Not that I'm trying to accomplish anything or come out and, do anything for the kingdom. I'm just resting in the Lord and finding that peace, because that's honestly when I just thrive. I've just got more energy, and I've just life is more full when I just have that peace and I seek that shalom that the Lord provides.
It's good stuff there. He is Steven Souza from the Chicago Cubs. Hey, man, I hope we're playing baseball this year, but it sounds like that shalom will allow you to be okay either way. But thanks so much for being here on the show, for sharing your testimony, and all the best to you.
Yeah, thank you. I'm hoping we play baseball too, and thanks for having me on.
And many thanks to Steven Souza from the Chicago Cubs for joining us here on Sports Spectrum. Really appreciate his heart for the Lord and sharing his story with us here on the show today. We also want to thank our sponsors, IJM International Justice Mission, for paying for this program. We appreciate their sponsorship and partnership. Check them out at ijm.org/TF to become a Freedom Partner today. Thanks so much for listening, and we'll see you next time right here on Sports Spectrum. Have a great rest of your day and stay safe.